Hi, this is Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and I think that some of you are really going to love what we're going to sew in today's tutorial. Now, what I have to tell you first and foremost is this tutorial is a little bit of a long one, so you might want to section it off into 3 sections, but the end result is gorgeous, as you can see behind me with our Hawaiian quilting collection from embroideryonline.com. So here's the drill. These little designs that you see here are all just one embroidery design per block. So the yellow one that you see here, there's 4 of them that you stitch together. You're going to embroider, you're going to quilt, all in the hoop. Then you stitch those pieces together and voila, you have a block. And then there's some other fun little twists that we've put on this project as well. So we have a handout that goes with this video, and you can find it in the description of this video, or you can also find it on our BERNINA of Naperville website. This is going to be our Hawaiian quilting sew-along. Now, it's only one tutorial, like I mentioned, but it's in 3 separate sections. So the first thing that I'm going to take you through is what I did to the digitized files that came from OESD already. So I enlarged them, and then I created a cutwork file so that I could pre-cut all these little shapes and I wouldn't have to sit there and cut them out, because otherwise what you do is you have a placement stitch, you place your fabric down, then it stitches 2 stitches really close together, kind of like a little tack down stitch. Then the machine stops and you trim those, and then you carry on with the satin stitching and the embroidery part. But that is a little bit time consuming when you're trying to make all of these different blocks. So I took to my BERNINA cutwork tool. The BERNINA cutwork tool is this cute little thing it replaces your needle with like a little chisel. It's a little tiny thing, goes where the needle goes, and it's round, and it's got numbers on it, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those numbers represent the angle of the chisel. The cutwork tool also comes with a foot, number 44C, and that's if you're buying it for the BERNINA machines, and you can use these on most BERNINA embroidery machines. You can also use the cutwork tool on the BERNINA 79. Now, this is what you see me doing here in this clip. So the only difference between the cutwork tool for the BERNINA and the cutwork tool for the BERNINA 79 or the BERNINA 70 is that that tool does not have the 44C foot with it, because 44C foot is proprietary to the BERNINAs. So let's get started with the software, and after we do the software, then it's time to start stitching.
Okay, so once you pick your design, and in this case I'm using the little clamshell one, it comes in, if we select all, I'm just going to left click and drag a little box around this, and if we look up here, we can see that the width is about 5.5 by 5.5. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you are not seeing your designs in inches and you're seeing them in metric, don't forget you have your little measurement drop-down menu here, and we can go from US to metric, so whichever measurement system you prefer. Let's face it, I can never do anything normal, so I have to make everything fancy. So in this application, I made the decision that I want my blocks to be a little bit larger. So I'm enlarging these to 6.5. And I'm just going to swipe and type in 6.5. I'm going to keep the proportion. See that little lock button right up here? So when that's yellow, that means that I'm locking my proportion. So it's going to keep everything nice and even. I press enter on my keyboard, and you can see that my design is enlarged. Now, when I embroider these out on my machine, this is still going to be in a position where I can embroider one up here and then one down there in the hoop. So pretty cool, right? But we don't need to do that necessarily right now. Right now, all we want to do is enlarge it like you just saw me do, and we're going to create our cutwork files. So in the BERNINA Embroidery Software, we have this tool called color film. And if yours is not pinned to the side of your machine here, all you have to do is just click this little thing that looks like a film strip at the top of the program. And it's the red, yellow, blue little film strip. So I'm going to left click on that, and then I can see all of the different things in the file. And all I need is color number 1. So I'm going to select color number 1. Then I can either copy it here. You can see these typical Windows things, cut, copy, paste. I could also press Control-C on my keyboard. But I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to select a new design. And now I'm going to paste. And one thing that I do want you to be mindful of once you've pasted this are our zoom tools. Let's go ahead and go to our drop-down menu and select To Hoop. And then we want to right-click on this little icon of our hoop. And I want you to make sure that you select foot number 44C, because we have to use 44C with our cutwork tool, and it shrinks the embroiderable area of our piece. So let's make sure that that's selected and we say OK. And you can see there that the perimeter of the hoop has shrunk. So now that I have this, I can go ahead and start working with this particular digitized outline to make our cutwork. And this is so easy. Let's click anywhere away from the hoop to deselect our item and find our cutwork stumpwork toolbox drawer over here on the left-hand side of our program. So the first thing that I want to do is select one element of this. And if we zoom in, you can see that this is actually 3 pieces. We've got our clamshell, and we've got our little, I'm going to call it a leaf, down here, and then a little leaf over here. But we can't do it all together. We have to do each one of these items individually. So I'm going to select this, and now if we look over here on the left, you can see I have this option to convert to cutwork border. So I'm going to select that. Then I have another option where I can select this and also convert that to cutwork border, and pick the other one and convert to cutwork border. Now this doesn't really look like what I'm aiming for, so I've got to do some things to it. And when I like to do special things to something, we're going to use our object properties. Object properties is up here at the top. It's a little, looks like a white page with a red chip on its shoulder. So I'm going to select that, and it's going to open another Docker. And with whatever item I have selected, we can look over here under cutwork border, and this is selecting piece, but we literally just want cut. So I'm going to select cut, and now you can see that our item has changed a little bit. I also have some other options here. I want to get rid of the outer stabilizing run. We're going to baste this in our machine, so we're not going to really stitch with thread around these individual pieces. Once you have deselected your outer stabilizing run and you make sure that the drop-down menu says cut, we're going to repeat this for these other little items in our hoop. So cut, and outer stabilizing run is deselected. And now we have one more piece. So now this piece is ready to be sent to the machine. You can save this if you want to do other things, but all we have to do is put a USB stick in our machine, or we can transfer this with our Wi-Fi device. So pretty simple. So you're going to send your cutwork file, and then we don't want to forget, we don't want to ignore our other little piece that we created here. And so now that we've enlarged this, we can also send this to our machine. All right, so we're one step closer. Let's cut these babies out.
Now that we have all of those files and we've sent those to the machine, now it's time to prep for our fusible web or our OESD applique fuse and fix. Now the fuse and fix is pretty cool because you can fuse it, peel it away, and then it sticks down. However, our blocks are just a little bit too big, so you're going to need about 4 packages of applique, fuse, and fix. I opted to go with Heat and Bond Light because I just have a lot of it and it comes a little bit wider on a roll, and I have one of those awesome Laura Star irons. So I used the Heat and Bond Light and just ironed in the hoop my little pieces down. But it's up to you which method you would want to see. You're going to see me use both of them. Making your cutwork pieces is super easy, and you saw that there's not even a lot of skill if you have the BERNINA Embroidery Software and you want to make your own cutwork pieces. But regardless if you're making your own, if you're using ours, you're going to need to I use Heat and Bond Light, and I've ironed 6-inch squares of Heat and Bond Light onto my 6-inch squares of material. And this fabric is a batik fabric. And if you, like I've mentioned already, want the kit that we provided for this Hawaiian quilt design from OESD, we have the kits available. So here is, I do 2 of the blocks at a time cutting, but I do each of them independent of each other. Okay. So in this case, we are doing our little purple design here with these, and we're doing our pink design here with these. The pink, I've changed the color. OESD does the little clamshell with a teal, but I changed it to pink. So these are the 2 that I'm going to use, and I want you to notice how I have taken my fabric with the fusible web. The paper's still on, and that's fine, but I'm lining them all up pretty side up. Don't put them in for cut work opposites, because some of these designs they don't mirror well. So make sure you take all of your pieces pretty side up, stack them, and have them just like this. And in this case, I'm doing that to both of these. Now, another thing is I am using this medium weight tearaway stabilizer. The BERNINA cutwork tool actually likes the thicker the better, but we've already got like 4 thicknesses of this stuff that we're using, so I'm just using this. Plus, at home right now, it's the only stabilizer I have that's wide enough for the jumbo hoop. Don't judge me. You don't have to use the jumbo hoop if you don't want to. You can certainly hoop up a layer of stabilizer in your midi hoop and do 1 block at a time. But I found making all 12 blocks, this was the easiest way for me. You could also use your maxi hoop if you have a BERNINA 7 series, but I am using my BERNINA 880 Plus because that is the machine that I am 100% in love with and use most of the time. Here we are with the jumbo hoop on the machine and the cutwork file that we sent via our Wi-Fi device. So I have taken my finger and I just moved that cutwork file to the top of the hoop to maximize space on the machine. No need to be totally accurate with it. We just want to create space because I want to save this portion down here for another design. I've also put on my cutwork tool foot, which is the 44C foot, but I haven't put my cutwork tool on yet because I'm going to baste my pieces of fabric on here first. Let me tell you a story. I'm a little embarrassed to tell you that I have run out of expert tape at home, so I have trimmed my tearaway sticky back stable stick stabilizer down to create my own pieces of tape. These are about 3/4 of an inch by 3 inches. Once again, please don't judge me. I'm getting ready to stitch up my design here, and I'm engaging the basting function. And I'm engaging the basting function that is only going to do the basting really close to the actual design. And then I'm going to move my little pile of fabric really close there, just kind of eyeballing it, and then taking my expert tape and taping my pile into position. And this is just going to help it not wiggle around. Now, the first thing is we can thread up any color at this point. We are just basting. And I'm going to just start sewing just to move my needle over there. And I'm going to use my thread up command to pull that bobbin thread up to the top. I do this because if I don't, there is a danger of the bobbin thread not catching right away when we start our basting. This is just a way to ensure that I'm going to get a nice basting stitch all the way around the perimeter of this cutwork design. And now with my needle changing screw and my little cutwork tool, I'm gonna change out this needle. It's also important to totally remove the upper thread at this point. And if you're not familiar with this cutwork tool piece here, you can see it. It's got little numbers on it. And I'm gonna put this on, and then whatever the machine tells me to turn this to, whatever number, is the number that I'm gonna use. Now, when we made our cutwork design, we actually we processed it in the software, so it knows when to change from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. And it uses it like a color change, but instead of showing up on your machine like a color change, it shows a little picture of this guy, and it'll say cut 1, cut 2, cut 3. And if it says cut 1, then we have to turn it until 1 shows. So let me put this on, show you the screen of the machine, and it'll make sense to you. Okay, so our screen says that color number 2 is a cutwork design. You can see that little icon right there, and it says cut 1. That means I'm gonna take my little wheel and turn it until it says position 1. See how it says 1 right there? If we needed to turn it to say 2, that would be 2. That would be 3. That would be 4. So we're turning it to position 1. And for the blade, there's a little blade in there. So position number 1 is pretty good at cutting. So cut number 1 is pretty good at making straight cuts up and down. Position 2 is at an angle. Position 3 is going to be side to side, and position 4 is at a different angle. So let's go ahead and stitch this out, and you're going to see I also am using my thread sequencing tool here on my machine. It may not eliminate this down to all of the different stitches I need, but it's going to make it a little bit easier for me. So I'm at position 1, and I'm getting ready to cut. Now it's time to change to position 2 and position 3, and then finally position 4. Now, I don't want to pop anything out. I don't want to do anything any differently. I'm going to bring my other cutwork file, my last one, and move it down into the bottom of the hoop, tape it down with all of my little fusible webbed pieces, just like you saw me do with this one, and follow the exact same process. And here's a little note to self. I'm threading my needle for this next design because I have to baste my pieces on, but my needle threader worked, and that's only because I did this with the machine thinking it's going to do basting. If you don't select basting and you try to put your needle in and use the needle threader and the machine still thinks it's got that cutwork tool on, the actual mechanism for the needle threader will not work. And of course, I'm speaking about my BERNINA 880 right here. So the fun thing about this is when the hoop comes off the machine, you can barely tell that you've cut anything until you start magically touching the pieces down below there, right? And so it is not uncommon for you to have to just do a little snip just to get the pieces released. And you want this because otherwise, if they just fell out while you were cutting, it could bung things up a little bit. So just don't think that there's something wrong if you have to just give a little clip to your pieces like that when you take them out of the machine. Let's be honest. It takes me a while to stitch these Hawaiian blocks when we applique them down and everything. So when you're storing your pieces, don't remove the paper until you get to the block that you're going to use the pieces for. So just be mindful of that, okay? Because it will help preserve the crispness of these pieces that you've cut. Now you're going to need a few things when you make this quilt. I used pure solids in snow for the whole thing. So this is Art Gallery Fabrics pure solids in the snow color, and I backed all of the white fabric with a fusible woven. Now the fusible woven on the white is just going to help me protect that sheer white fabric from little threads that happen to get stuck underneath the embroidery design or whatever. So I cut those into 48 squares that are about 8 inches. I have the specifics in the handout that goes along with this video. Then you're also going to cut for your sashings and your backing sashings, because this is a quilt as you go block. So we make all of our blocks, then we're going to affix them together, and then we're going to kind of piece them on the back like a magic trick so it looks like one cohesive quilt. So we're going to need some extra pieces for those. Finally, you're going to need about 7-inch squares of a white batting. I used a poly cotton blend, all in white, cut my squares 7 inches, and I needed 48 of them. Finally, we're able to embroider out these blocks. So I have a layer of poly mesh stabilizer that I'm going to be using with my square 8.5-inch medium clamp hoop. And I'm going to lay my poly mesh stabilizer down just like this, and I'm going to use these clamps to hold the poly mesh into place. And then once that's into position, I'm going to put this on the machine where we're going to float our block. Now this is about an 8-inch block that's been interfaced with fusible woven, only because it's white. I want it to be kind of opaque, and I want it to have just a little bit more substance. So here is the design that we want to stitch out, and you can see these open areas are where the fabric that we cut using those cutwork files is going to be placed. Then we're ready to send this to the machine because we're not enlarging, reducing, or anything like that. And one of the things that I want to do, because the first stitch that's coming on here is going to be a placement stitch for those applique pieces, but I still need to put my fabric on the hoop with this poly mesh stabilizer. So what I want to do is touch the basting box just one time, and that's going to do a little basting perimeter around this file. It also has moved my needle down here in the corner, which is going to allow me to take my 8-inch piece of white fabric that has been interfaced with the fusible woven, and I'm going to just line it up. We don't have to be completely accurate, but I'm just going to line it up like right there in the corner like that. I kind of try to get it as close as I possibly can. Then I'm going to hold my thread, and I have white thread in here right now, but you could also use the matching thread to your applique because this piece is never going to be seen. So now I'm going to use my needle up-down command to pull my bobbin thread up so I can hang on to it, because when you're doing basting, sometimes the thread doesn't catch as well as you would like. So I'm just going to hold this into position now. And you can see I didn't get it exactly straight, but at the end of the day, it's not going to matter much. So now this next stitch is going to be our outlining stitch for where to place our applique. So now remember we talked about fuse and fix, the applique fuse and fix versus the heat and bound light. And the heat and bound light is nice, but we have to make sure we have a big hoop like this so we can get an iron in here. Well, the fuse and fix works the same way as the fusible web, except when you peel the paper off, it is totally sticky. So the heat and bond light is a little bit more economical, particularly if you're making the big quilt and everything. But if you plan your pieces just right, you can use the fuse and fix appropriately as well. You are going to need, let's just err on making sure you have enough. You might need about 4 packages of the applique fuse and fix, whereas the heat and bond light comes in yardage that you can be a bit more clever with, and it comes wider, but nonetheless it depends on what you want. So the applique fuse and fix, we're just going to peel it away after we fused it on, and the fix part is that this is sticky, and so I can put this on right in those areas in my border and just stick it down, and I don't have to hit it with the iron. In fact, I can do this while my hoop is still on the machine and everything. And then this piece also has the fuse and fix on it. And now line that up into position. And I'm going to change my thread color now to my cover thread that's going to complement this purple.
If you use code HAWAII, all in caps at checkout, you'll get 20% off a selection of Isacord threads.
Now this color, or this segment here, is just going to go around our piece and then do another little pass just inside. And this is the pass that if you were opting to just sew your fabrics down into position and trim really close, this is the step that's the tack down stitch. But I kept it in the file just to have some, make sure I put my fabric down in the right spot and all that good stuff. Once all of the color stitches out, you're going to take your hoop off of the machine, turn it upside down, and spray the back with 505 spray. Then you have like a 7-inch square of batting that you're going to place. I kind of like to put it right here, lining it up with that corner like that, and just stick it on the back with that 505, keeping it sticky. Okay, so this color, which is color number 5, I'm going to change, instead of doing white, I'm changing this to Superior Vanish thread. This is water soluble, and why I like using this on this particular color is because this is our stitching line, and our stitching line is maybe going to show when we go to sew these together. So rather than having to pick out a whole bunch of stitches, it's better to just have this water soluble thread, which can just wipe off with a washcloth. Then you're going to turn your hoop over, put it back on your machine. And now we're going to remove the hoop one more time, turn the hoop upside down, and trim the extra edges of batting right up close to that stitching line that we just performed. And this will help eliminate any kind of thickness or bulk in these seam allowances when we sew our blocks together. And now that everything's trimmed, you're going to clip your hoop back on and continue with the final stitch. Now, the important thing to remember is when you're on to the last color, to take this thread out and replace it with the white thread you've been using for your quilting. Now, once you have your piece done, you can remove it from the hoop, take it out of the hoop, and then put another poly mesh sheet in and repeat, because for each different design, you need to make 4 of these. So now that we have finished all of the embroidery and trimmed them up, we have a nice sizable stack here of pieces that need to be assembled. So let's take this one that we just did. And they're going to be stitched together like a 4-patch, where these little guys here interconnect like this. And then I am just going to sew this piece to this piece, and I'm going to be keeping the seam allowances lined up together. And because I used that water soluble thread, if there are any little seams poking through later, no big deal. We can wipe it with a washcloth and be done with it. But we're going to stitch, and I still like to think of stitching just like a little wee bit onto the left side of that basting stitch. So once you sew these 2 pieces together and these 2 pieces together, you're going to press the seams open and then sew the rows together and press that seam open. If you're not familiar with a clapper, they come in many different shapes and sizes, but this is my preferred one. When I'm making bags and things like that, I have this surface that can kind of get in there to any points and things like that. Plus, it's got significant weight to it. So let me show you what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to open up my pieces, And I'm going to use my fingernails. If you don't have fingernails, you can use like a stiletto or something and really open these seams up. And we're going to press these totally flat, totally open. And I'll just do both seams. And then you take your clapper and you put that down on the seams, let it cool, and it keeps your seam nice and flat. And you can see what a phenomenal pressing job it does. So now we're going to line these two guys up together, sew down this seam, and repeat the pressing process using our clapper. So let's repeat this for our other blocks. And I'm making 12. Okay, so now that the blocks are together, it's time to think about the backing. So my blocks measure exactly 12 inches. So I have cut 12-inch blocks of my flip-flop fabric. I thought that was perfect for a Hawaiian theme quilt. So that's what you need of this. And then I have 8 pieces, and this is the backing, 8 pieces that are 1.5 inches by 12 inches, and 3 pieces that are 1.5 inches by 36, because once I sew my sashings together, my pieces measure out to be 36 inches. So let's have a look at the top. So I have my 12 blocks here that you saw me assemble and press. So now with those 12 blocks, we have 8 1-inch by 12-inch strips. And yes, these do have that fusible backing on them just because I wanted everything to kind of have the same weight. Then with this, I have 1-inch by 36 inches for the top. And this process is fairly easy to assemble, but we need cool things to do it, of course. Now, since these are going on the front and these pieces are going on the back, we want to prep this because this is a quilt as you go technique where I'm going to take each block and put a sashing strip down the side of it, and then on the back cover my raw edges with one of these 1.5-inch pieces. So the first thing to do to prep is to prep these pieces, and I'm going to prep my 12-inch pieces and my 36-inch pieces. So these go to the iron, and these don't have any fusible backing on them. But the print backing pieces go to the iron, and they're going to be pressed to the middle, nice and flat. So with a little 505 spray, you're going to spray the back side of your block and then add your 12-inch block on top. Now, this is something important. My blocks measure 12 inches. Make sure you measure yours, and if there's one that's a little larger or whatever, go ahead and trim it down, because you can see here there's a little bit of room here if they got just a little off, but consistently mine are 12 inches. But when you cut your background pieces, just cut based on your own measurement. So now that I have this guy on, and this is on the back, I'm going to serge around all 4 sides using my BERNINA L890 serger and fusible thread in the lower looper. So I'm going to serge this pretty side up, boom, 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 and that lower looper has this fusible thread in it that ultimately is going to help me when we go to do the quilt as you go process. So I've set up for a 3-thread narrow. You could also use a 3-thread wide, whichever. And I'm going to go ahead and serge around. So once everything is threaded up and ready, you're going to just make sure that all of your edges are even. Turn it upside down and stitch. And you might be asking why I wouldn't just stitch with the backing on the top side or whatever. It's just I like putting my stiffer fabric on top of the looser fabric. You'll also notice that I'm not trimming very much off of my block here. Just little whiskers. And then I'm just going to sew off a little so I can get this into position. Also making sure that my backing didn't shift. It's got that adhesive spray on it, but sometimes it shifts. You're just going to carry on this process with the other blocks, and you can see what it looks like on the back versus the front. I wanted to show you this one. This is my little rogue block. This is my little rogue block that is a little bit bigger than 12 inches. In fact, it's about 12 3/8. So what I did is I centered my backing into position, and now when I serge, I'm going to just take a little bit of like 1/8 of an inch, maybe not quite 1/8 of an inch, all the way around, and that shall make it the right size. Okay, so look, same block, nice edges. So that trick worked, and I'm just going to trim these guys. And I make sure that I don't trim these on my ironing board because you can accidentally get these little guys fused to your board, and you don't want that, especially if you have one of those nice Laura stars. So now I just need to follow this process for everything else, and always check, make sure everything measures just right. Once you have all of your backings on and serged, it's important to lay out your quilt. So just like we sewed the blocks together, I have my 97D foot on, and according to my layout, I have to add one of my interface pieces to the right side of this purple block. So I'm going to line this up, matching the tops because I cut these the length that I needed. And now we're going to stitch. Now the weird thing is with this, you can't really press because you've got that fusible thread under there. So you just have to finger press this over like this. And then we're going to take our piece. I'm going to sew this to a blue piece. And now this goes up here like this, and you may need to just kind of pull that back like that, just so that you have a nice flat area to stitch. Now we're going to attach to the purple side another interfaced 1-inch strip by 12 inches. And then an orange piece goes on to this, lining it up just like we did the other piece. And if you hear a ruckus, that's Bonaparte and his beanbag. All right, so you finger press the front, and now we're just going to kind of spread things out a little bit, keeping our seam allowances pressed towards the sashing. Then we're going to take a strip that we've pre-folded, and we're going to put it right in the center of that piece, and we have to just make sure that when we press this, we don't hit the fusible web that's still on the other sides of this piece. Or the fusible thread, not web. Well, It's fusible web in thread. Okay. And now we do this piece. And then once you have your sashing strip on, you're going to stitch. And I like to have my folded edge of my little strip there just on the inside of the toe, the closest part of the toe to the needle. To just top stitch this from the back onto the front.
And once you have your rows stitched together, it's time to stitch the long piece of the interfaced white sashing.
All right, so once again with the finger pressing, because we can't press this over because of the fusible thread. So now that we have this into position, I'm going to take a little ruler and just draw a line at each of these little seams on both sides, so I know exactly where I'm going to line up the sashing on my next piece. So now that I have my blue lines marked there, I'm going to take this piece and make sure that I line these up exactly with that sashing piece in the middle of those blue lines. And I'm going to do it on this other piece. Blue lines, sashing piece right in the middle. And back to the machine to stitch. So this is why you make those notches, so you get a nice intersection like that. Now that's going to wash away with some water because it's a water-soluble pen. Now, let's take a long piece of our backing fabric and cover this fused portion. And remember, we're going to kind of tug this a little bit so those pieces lay flat together. Then we're going to cover that seam with the strip of this right down the middle and press. And I'm going to cover this whole piece and then just do all of my rows together, just like you saw me do this one, and then we're ready for the binding. Okay, so look at this guy. It has all of the blocks assembled, and if we turn it over, all of those strips are on the back. Now, the only thing left is to do the binding. So what I'm gonna do, because I have this fusible on the back there, I actually want the fusible also to be on the front. So I'm gonna run this around my serger one more time with this side up in the serger, so I have fusible on both sides, and that's going to help me when I sew my binding to the back and bring it around to the front. And then the final top stitching will be done on my machine, my sewing machine rather, and yeah, this will be complete, and I really, really think it's cute. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you make at least one block, because just one of these blocks would make for a really nice pillow. So don't forget to check out some of our other tutorials on our BERNINA of Naperville YouTube channel. It's easy. It's youtube.com/BERNINA of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe.